my name's Kim. Summerween is fast approaching, but I will be on holiday during Summerween. And so I thought I would do a still Summerweeny video because I have one, slacked on reading my horror books this year, and two, need a little bit more motivation at the moment to pick something up. So what I thought I would do is a very typical pick something out of the jar video. I was originally going to use my pen pot over there, but the meagre amount of things in here, there's not very many, made it look a bit sad. So instead I thought I would do the donut jar, because what else am I going to use it for? I think it's actually quite a nice little TBR jar. So the plan is to pick something out of here. I have about probably 15 options. It's a mix of what I have physically, but also what I have on my Kindle, because the idea is that I probably will read a little bit while I'm away. So I'm going to pick out 3 books, I think, to give myself a bit of range, and also just so that, you know, if I decide to not pick one up, then I don't have to read it. I probably am not going to be vlogging whilst I'm away, but I will touch base at some point, probably, to let you know how I'm feeling, what motivation's like. So, like I said, there are about 15-ish books on here. I have my horror shelf right here in front of me, which is why I thought I would film it in this place, so I can just very easily grab it. It'd be really nice as well to make some headway with what I have physically, because I don't have that many physical horror books, and I've kind of read half of them and the other half I haven't read. So it is going to be a case of getting through them, seeing whether I like them, how I feel about them, and then also hopefully I can make some headway with what I've got on my Kindle, because I have quite a lot of books that I've downloaded I just haven't really read. So without further ado, book number 1. Oh, I've just lost one. That one stay on the book. Book number 2. And book number 3. Okay. Drum roll. First book that has been picked is From Below by Darcy Coates. So that one is right here. This one is a mermaid horror. I picked this up ages ago after reading, oh my god, what's it called? A Dark and Drowning Tide by Mira Grant, aka Shauna Maguire, because I love the idea of kind of killer mermaidy vibes, and if you know anything about me, I also love deep sea related things. So this one, it's been on my radar for ages. I've physically owned it for probably at least 3 years now, so it actually is good to try and get to this. The description says, no light, no air, no escape. Hundreds of feet beneath the ocean's surface, a graveyard waits. Years ago, during a routine voyage, the SS Arcadia vanished without a trace. Though a strange garbled emergency message was broadcast, neither the ship nor its crew would ever be found. 60 years later, its wreck has finally been discovered more than 300 miles from its intended course, a silent graveyard beneath the ocean's surface, eagerly waiting for the first signs of life. Cove and her dive team have been granted permission to explore the Arcadia's rusting hull. Their purpose is straightforward: examine the wreck, film everything, and if possible, uncover how and why the supposedly unsinkable ship vanished. But the Arcadia has not yet had its fill of death, and something dark and hungry watches from below. With limited oxygen and the ship slowly closing in around them, Cove and her team will have to fight their way free of the unspeakable horror, now desperate to claim them. Very dramatic. I feel like this will be a fun read, at least. I've not actually read any Darcy Coates before, and she's quite a prolific author in the kind of horror community, so actually it's really nice to be able to read this one. Option number 2 is The Curse of Hester Gardens. This is one I have on my Kindle, which I should probably go and get actually. One moment. So The Curse of Hester Gardens, okay, this one here, I actually read the first chapter of for a video that I did last month, in which I read the first chapter of a bunch of books, just to try and pick one to read. And in the first chapter we have a character who witnesses some violent crime, and it turns out that she actually recognises one of the people who was involved in this violent crime. I because I've started it, obviously I've got a bit of a feel for what it's like. I'm going to give it definitely a couple more chapters to see how I feel about it. I think it's going to be more of a thriller as opposed to a kind of like horror-centric book. I think it is more kind of about the realities of crime and things like that. So I'm going to give it a shot and see. I wasn't in love with the way it was written, but there's only one way to find out, and that is by giving it a chance. Final book is, Humboldt Cut, which is also a book I have on my Kindle, which is just right here. This one is actually described as Jeff Vandermeer meets Jordan Peele, because the author is actually a comedy writer, and it's also an eco-horror, but also meant to be comedic. And I know that the first little bit of it, because I just looked at the first kind of couple of pages, has extracts of like newspaper articles. So actually I'm quite looking forward to getting started on this one. I'm hoping that I will like it, because it seems quite interesting. It kind of follows your typical story of a woman who's very burnt out and returning to this isolated community, and need to find out something is kind of lurking in the shadows. So 3 choices, very interesting to see which I make it through, essentially. I'm hoping to make it through more than one. I'm not really following the challenges that are set by Summerween. It's pretty much just a case of I'm trying to read through my physical / digital TBR. It'd be really nice to read a physical book. I think I'm going to start with this one probably, because I go on holiday within a couple of days, and so ideally I'm only going to take my Kindle with me. So it'd be really nice to read this before I go. And yeah, that is all from me. I wonder what this one I dropped on the floor was. It was Mexican Gothic. Ugh, I really do need to get around to reading that at some point. I have had it for years, and I have the retro kind of cover as well. But those 3 are my 3 options, my 3 choices that I'm going to read for now and give them all a shot. I still have a handful. I think there's probably less than 15 in here actually, but there are still a couple of options in there. And I'm going to keep this to the side because I'm kind of thinking that this might be a kind of month-long project where I just try and read my horror books in the month of July and have a bit of Summerween. So I will leave that there so that when I come back from holiday, I can maybe pull from the jar again, update you on these 3, and see if there's anything else that I'd be interested in reading for the next couple of weeks. So I'll update you when I make a start on, well, from below, when I make a start on this one. It's that time of year when I'm in yet another hotel for work, so you'll have to mind the 1 terrible angle, 2 the background noise from the bathroom, and yeah, anyway, I started From Below last night by Darcy Coates. I brought it with me because I managed to get just under 160 pages in last night. We are following Cove and the other members of her crew. All of them have different uses on this trip. The Arcadia has been found for the first time in over 100 years, and they're going to go and they're going to do the dive for the first time. So she's got a dive expert, she's got a camera expert, she's got a newbie who's basically an assistant and is helping cook. She's got a marine biologist, even though the marine biologist isn't a marine biologist of the type that's necessary. She's essentially just there for authenticity of them having a realistic dive. They've got the rich person who's funded them on the boat, and we also have her cameraman as well. So we have a variety of different characters, all of which you can see start to have their own different personalities. We switch back and forth between points of view, so we have our present day point of view where we have a mix of different points of view between that cast. So we've got Cove as the main point of view. We've also got a character called Sean, who is one of the camera operators. The cameras that he uses are like the remote operated ones, so that they should have been able to go down and explore the dive before, or explore the shipwreck before they go down to dive, but things don't quite work out that way. We've also got Aidan, who's the newbie, and especially through his point of view, and Hesty, I think her name is, who's a marine biologist. We are seeing that they have their own thoughts and feelings. Aidan, for example, is very nervous. He's not quite cut out for this, essentially, and so he lies about the amount of oxygen he has left in his tank, and so you know that they're all keeping stuff from each other. We have Vanna, who is the dive expert, who has got a diary that Sean found that has got some weird messages in, so he obviously is kind of freaked out by her, and he's just disclosed to Cove what he's found. But 160 pages in, we have them, and we also have flashbacks to the Arcadia itself. So we're kind of counting down until the days before the Arcadia sinks, and we're seeing about what's going on board. There are strange things happening. People have gone overboard. People seem to be losing their minds. It reminds me a lot of, I think it's C.J. Cook. I can't remember what the book's called. Something about something in the Arctic. And the back and forth between the points of view and the kind of isolation that being on a ship can bring you. And also Into the Drowning Deep does have some comparisons as well, obviously. At this point, although I'm pretty sure it is Killer Mermaids, because I'm pretty sure that's why I picked it up, and it was comped to Into the Drowning Deep, we haven't had any real reveal. And I say that, actually, I take that back. There's one moment where we see something strange, but it's on reflection, looking back at the footage, and it's not been disclosed to the whole group yet. So we have all of these different things going on. I do appreciate that the fact that pretty much about 100 so pages of that first 160 pages was the first dive itself, and we managed to go through and make what was, you know, a couple of hours dive really kind of important. Everything's important when they're viewing this for the first time, but in terms of them being able to switch in between points of view to see what different people are looking at, and each person looking at different things and the different feelings they're having while they're down below, all of these different elements I think helped make it not feel like it was dragging out. And I know that we're about to go into the second dive now, which they're all kind of going down with a feeling of slight unease because they managed to see a bloated dead body that hasn't quite decomposed because of the conditions that the ship has sunk in. So they're getting a little bit tense on the ship, and they're definitely a little bit afraid. So I'm interested to see how it's going to play out. It has been a really easy read. I just sat down and read some last night, and I was quite surprised at how easy it was that I was just reading. I was going to put it down and I was like, well, I can just continue a bit more. Like, it's not difficult to get through. So I am finding it really easy to read. I did also, on my train today, have a little look at the other two books I picked up. The Curse of Hester Gardens, I read the first chapter where we have something unsettling happen again. And I'm still unsure about that one. I think I am going to give it a little bit longer, but I am kind of leaning towards maybe dropping that one. And then we've also got Humboldt Cut, which starts with a chapter where these people are going and cutting down the big redwood trees and the kind of operation that it is, and you're just reading it and thinking about the fact that they're cutting down these trees and taking pictures of the fact that they're cutting down these trees, and all of a sudden something really dramatic happens and suddenly it is a bloodbath. We'll put it that way. Not actively a bloodbath, but that's what's kind of implied, and so something weird has happened, and so I am curious to see how that one picks up from that point on. I think it definitely has a really good hook in the sense that you are lulled into a false sense of security by these guys who are just there going to chop down the trees, and suddenly they're dead. Spoilers. But yeah, I am interested in that one. I will try and read a bit more tonight, and I'll let you know when I'm a little bit further into From Below. The return of the tripod means the return of the bookshelves. I managed to finish From Below by Darcy Coates. I'm giving it 3.5. I did quite enjoy it. I thought it was a really easy book to read, and I think it's just what I needed in that sense. I think the actual tension within the story was done really well. We only really spend 4 days with these characters. They do 3 dives over 3 days, and then they have the kind of beginning and the end when they're arriving at the dive site and when they're leaving. And so considering it's a 450 page book, a lot of things happen. My kind of things that kind of made me sit at 3.5. First, I think the way it was written is why it was a 3.5 instead of a 3, but it wasn't quite a 4 just because I felt like some of the characters were less well done. We spend a lot of time with the characters under the surface, and not all of the characters are going on these dives. And so there's 2 characters who remain above surface pretty much all the time, and they have their moment kind of towards the end of the book, but I think because we didn't really see them as much earlier on, and the limit of their character dimensions beforehand kind of impacted the acts that they did at the end of the book. I also think that it was very, I don't want to say happy end, but it was a happier ending, shall we say, than I almost anticipated. I expected things to go worse than they did, and so the fact that we got relatively good things happened until the very end, even though there were some very tense moments with some very close calls, I almost wanted something to go wrong, because I felt like at the end I kind of felt like, oh, everyone got out. And that sounds like a silly thing to say because it's a good thing that everyone makes it to the end of the horror book, but I'm not sure that I actually wanted that. I also need to correct and say it's not Killer Mermaids, it's just, well, no spoilers, I won't spoil it for you in case you're interested in reading it. But I do think that the creatures that are in this book were really interesting, and I do like the idea that the fact that they mentioned a potential real life cause for what happened, but that they also had the supernatural element as well. There was that doubt that kind of came in, and so there was a moment where I thought, are they just going to completely sideline the supernatural element of all this? But they didn't, and I'm glad for it. But there was a idea as to what might have caused things to go wrong in the first place, but then with the flashbacks between with the flashbacks to the original time period when the ship was sinking, we can see that things were not quite right then, regardless of whether the natural cause of this potential madness existed then or not. So that brings me to the end of this one book down. I'm very glad to have finished it. I am thinking I'm going to pull 3 more books from the jar because I have read a little bit more of Humboldt Cut, but not very much, and I'm going on holiday this weekend, and so I'd like to at least have a few more options alongside the other 2. I was only planning on taking my Kindle with me, so I might actually go through and take out what's in the jar that I have physically so that I don't read it, and so I only have my horror Kindle books with me, because I'm only taking my Kindle when I go away. So one moment. So I just went and pulled the ones that were physical out of the jar, and there's actually more physical ones than there are Kindle ones, so there are only 3 Kindle ones that are still in here, so it kind of feels a bit unfair to pick 3 and decide to pick from them. So I think I'm only going to pick 1 and have that as a potential option. So let's have a look. It is, oh, it's The Good House by China Reeve. This one's going to be a pretty intense one, but it's going to be a chunky one. So it's one that I've wanted to read for a while. It's actually on my 20-ish books I want to read in 2026. I've read a couple of China Reeve now. I read The Reformatory about 2 years ago, and I really did like that. I gave that 5 stars. I read her short story collection, The Wishing Pool and Other Stories, last summerween. So actually it'll probably be a good trend to read another China Reeve book for this year's summerween. I don't know how much I'll get rid of that on holiday because I feel like I'm going to a very sunny place and reading quite a dark, intense book is probably going to be a bit difficult, but I'm glad that I have that as an option for me to kind of dip in and out of, because it'd be nice to make some progress on it. So that is the next book that I will add alongside Humboldt Cut and The Curse of Hester Gardens, a range of black authors, which is really nice as well. I returned from holiday. I did actually manage to finish Humboldt Cut. I read it a little bit on my final day and I finished it on the journey back. I think it's going to be a 3-star book. There is a couple of comparisons that kind of were floating around whilst I was reading it. Jackal, for one, because it specifically looks at race and understanding the relationship between race and nature, and how nature can be powerful for people of colour to reclaim essentially their identity and their place in the land. But it also reminded me of Green Fuse Burning, in the sense of the kind of direction that we kind of went in the book. So we have our main character Jasmine. Her and her brother James, they recently lost their aunt Jin, and so Jasmine is returning to the area essentially, and the 2 siblings don't really get along. There's specific things in their past that we learn about what happened with their mother, and just the kind of relationship they have. James is married to Jasmine's former best friend Tilly, and there is kind of like a weird relationship between the 3 of them, because James and Tilly are obviously together. Tilly and Jasmine had what essentially is a very deep verging on romantic relationship, and I think there's some issues with how Jasmine feels about the fact that her brother is with her best friend, and the 3 of them are kind of rotating around each other. We also have Henry, who's come along with Jasmine. He is a guy that she works with and is hoping to become a little bit closer to her romantically over the course of the trip. He essentially offers to drive Jasmine back to where the funeral is, and very quickly we get into kind of a bit of a mess. Those first few chapters where we look at the forest and the things that are going on with them in the forest, we are starting to see that there is something kind of going on, and very quickly James and Jasmine have an argument. James goes off, gets lost in the woods, and the majority of the book then is spent in the woods, searching for James, encountering other people, also flashbacks to previous time period, where we are learning more about what went on in the woods. The monster comparison, which is a bit of a spoiler in a way, that I would make is with the video game Until Dawn. The vibes of them being in the forest very much gave me the vibes of the Until Dawn game, but it is a different story and it is a different type of monster in terms of what goes on. By the end of the book we get a resolution. I think it's one of those things where I'm the sort of person who does like to have things explained to me. I'm not necessarily opposed to an open ending, but in this instance we didn't get an open ending, and I think it would have benefited from a more open ending, because things got very resolved in terms of what happens with the forest, what happens with Jasmine, us learning more about the history, things kind of come in full circle. And I think that was what kind of laid it down a little bit for me. I would recommend to check it out. It's fairly easy to read, and I really did like the back and forth point of view. I tend to like that a lot in a book where we are getting the past and we're able to make the connections ourselves between what is being said in the present day and what actually happened in the past, and especially once you learn kind of the key information towards the end of the book, you can understand why we were getting all of these different points of view and how everything links together in the present day. I did not read any more of The Curse of Hester Gardens, and I didn't even start The Good House at all. But my goal is to at least try and read a bit more of The Curse of Hester Gardens, like I said, before I decide whether I'm going to DNF, and make a start with The Good House, because it is on my 20ish books to read in 2026 and I would like to read it this year. It's a big one. I know it's going to take me a little bit, and the formatting on my Kindle is a little bit weird, so I just kind of looked at it and went, oh, I'll deal with this another time when I'm not on holiday. A quick morning update in this terrible lighting to let you know that I'm 10% of the way into The Good House. We learned very quickly from the blurb that something wrong is going to happen in this house, and we also see that in the way that it's written, where our first kind of like prologue, I guess, is of our main character Angela's ancestor, her grandma, called Marie. She was a healer. She was married to a Native American man, and so the two of them, a black woman and a Native American man, were very much, what's the word I'm looking for, pariahs, I guess, in their very small town. The few people of colour, and they were only treated with respect after a certain point of them being able to help people essentially and heal people. So Angela has always felt a bit of a way about the town and the Good House, as it's called, but we get the feeling that something is going to happen, because they're, especially within like the initial kind of like chapter opening part of her section, it says like, you know, she didn't know that there was only 5 minutes until things were going to go wrong and something pretty significant happens. No spoilers, obviously. I think that obviously we will unfold why that event happened the way it did. The kind of main players that we have are Angela, her ex-husband Tariq, who can be seen to be quite an aggressive man, and they broke up and they are kind of on the precipice of maybe getting back together, but she's still quite wary of his anger at this point. And then we have their 15-year-old son Corey, who seems quite shy and quite quiet and reserved. We know that he has a friend called Sean, who hasn't quite popped up yet, and I'm sure we'll find out about whatever it was that Corey and Sean were kind of sneaking off to do. And then we have the house itself. So at this point we have time switched to 2 years later. Angela is basically debating whether or not to sell the house, and I have a feeling that she's essentially going to go back, because someone that she works with has said you should go back at least, if you are considering selling it, to make sure this is the right decision for you. And that's where I'm at, 10% of the way in. I'm liking it so far, but nothing has really happened. I'm finding it quite easy to read, and I think the main thing is that I'm curious about where the story is going to go, because it's like on my Kindle it's like 700 pages so I think it's just under 600 pages in print. So I am, you know, not even 100 pages in yet. I know from the blurb that Angela's going to team up with an old friend slash flame who we have briefly met and who was at the house when that incident happened, because it was a 4th of July, I believe, basically a gathering, and everyone was invited, so everyone knows what happened on that day, and so they're gonna meet up again. So my kind of thoughts are she's going to go back to the house, she's going to meet up with this person, and then we're going to see what happens with the house, with her grandmother. I'm sure it'll go back in time to learning more about her and the kind of like whatever is going on with her and this house, and then also the other relationships in Angela's life as well. Yeah, I think I'm going to try and get through it, well, not as quick as I can, but I want to make progress on it, because I feel like obviously being such a chunky book, it can be quite intimidating to get through, but I'm just trying to make my way through it as much as possible every day, and that's my update. I'll talk to you in a bit. I have not updated you on The Good House because I was going to scrap this video. I had just got to the point where I was like, oh, this book's taking me 2 weeks to read, and what's the point? Anyway, I finished it, so I thought I would do the right thing and come on and share my thoughts, because I have quite a few thoughts, and it's literally, I was going to read another book for the video. I filmed a clip and everything to pull another book, but I just was like, no, we'll wrap it up here, because this one was obviously very big. So The Good House, we have Angela, and the story that we follow, like I said, something pretty significant happens with Angela and Corey and Tariq, her family, in this house, the Good House, and as we go through the story, we start to see what exactly happened. We get points of view from literally pretty much everyone that we encounter in the book. So you have some of them are in flashback points of view, but you have, and some of them are like entire periods of time points of view. So we have like her grandmother, who's one of the main figures kind of haunting the narrative. We have Angela herself, who's the main point of view character. We have Tariq, who is her ex-husband, who crops up every now and again. He is a bit of a, I mean, he's an angry man, and the incident that happens triggers their separation, but he is still a figure that crops up and becomes more present in the story as the story goes on. We have their son Corey. We see a lot about what he was getting up to just before this incident happened, because that is a real trigger point for everything that happens in the book. And then we have a couple of other characters as well. Naomi, who is Angela works as her agent. So we have her. She is the one who encourages Angela to go back to the house, and so she is a kind of floating around as a character. And then there's also Miles, who's mentioned in the blurb of the book, who is Angela's high school boyfriend. Basically they were the first loves of each other's lives, and at the very beginning of the book, before the big incident happens, they have like a slight flirtation because he hears that she's back in town, and you kind of think that maybe something is going to happen there. And so we go throughout the whole story. I can't reveal, I mean, I'm notorious for spoilers, so, but I'm not going to spoil, I think, what the massive big thing that happens in this is, but it is very significant. There needs to be quite a few trigger warnings if you are going into this book, for death as the main thing. This is ultimately a possession story, and so everything that comes along with that in terms of people doing things that they would not do if they were not possessed, which includes killing other people. That is the main kind of thing that I would say, because quite a few people die, and the book is really quite slow in the beginning. It really is the first 50%. I was really kind of slowly getting through it because things were happening, but it was more that we were responding to what had happened at the incident at the beginning, and it was kind of the aftermath and the healing, or attempting to heal from that, and kind of making connections again for the first time in quite a while. But then the second half of the book is where things really kick off, as we start to learn actually what triggered that incident to happen and what else is going on below the surface, and the history that we get from the chapters about Marie and Corey as well, when we start to get his chapters, and things start obviously piecing together. And so that I read a lot faster the second half, because it felt like things were moving at a lot faster pace, and I think that is a way, it's just the way that Tadano Riju writes in a way, because The Reformatory is also a very chunky book, and I remember that I found that quite dense at times, but I did fly through that really quickly. I did find that a lot easier to read than this one, and I don't quite know why. I don't know if it's just my lack of reading motivation or whatever it was. So I definitely preferred the second half of the book to the first half. However, the ending, I'm interested to see what other people think about it, because it's similar to the Darcy Coates book that I read, where things were building to a climax at the end, and I thought that they were just going to end that way. And everything that happens in this story is bittersweet. Essentially, there is a lot of death surrounding Angela, and for her to end the story, defeat this bad person, and try and move through life to heal would make sense as an ending, but that's not quite the ending we get. We get a happier ending than you would anticipate. And as soon as the kind of words before the ending happened came on the page and it talked about maybe like a miracle happening, I was like, I know what's going to happen. And so we have an ending that is really positive, and or maybe not really positive, that's probably not the right words. It is a more positive ending to the book. And it's the same with From Below. That's not a bad thing. I don't dislike the fact that it was a happier ending, because you don't want it all to just be black trauma. You want black happiness, or healing in a positive way that is not, completely saturated with trauma and grief. So I can't knock it in that sense, but again, it's one of those things where the ending then kind of put like a nice little bow on it, and so I don't know how I felt about the ending. So I think it's going to be a 4 from me. I do like Tananarive Dew's work. I found both stories I read from her now, because I read the Reformatory as well, to be just really in-depth and detailed, and she has another book coming out this year as well, which I'm definitely going to pick up. It's just that they are very much steeped in the black experience, and so I think that they can be quite difficult to move through at times, because it feels heavy. It's heavy to read, but that's also reality. So I can't, again, knock what I'm reading, because it is the reality to be exposed to so much trauma and gun violence and historical violence and racism and everything else that comes along with everything that it is to have the black experience, or even the Native American experience, because that's also touched on in this book, only a little bit though. That brings me to the end of the video. I'm not going to read another book. I did pull Mexican Gothic, but I'm at the point where I need a bit of a break from horror. I think I need to pick up some lighter books, because I've kind of gone back into my slight slump again, where I'm really slowed down my reading. So I'm going to wrap it up here, but I managed to read 3 horror books for my kind of summerween video. So hopefully you enjoyed, and if you have any thoughts or feelings on any of the books I read in this video, let me know. I'd like to hear them.